Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at BTB World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two very important stories. The first is in reference to what the PTI chairman, Mr. Imran Khan, has talked about in a recent interview with Voice of America and then also a televised address over the weekend, where he has mentioned a couple of things, making once more a sharp U-turn from his previous statements and allegations. Since his ouster, the PTI chairman has been blaming a US-led conspiracy that has resulted in the imported government, but somehow the word imported has now been shifted to exported. And what now has happened is that the former army chief has been responsible for exporting this conspiracy to the US, from where then it was implemented in order to ouster the former prime minister. This of course comes once again in terms of what the PTI has been talking about regarding their ouster, regarding the elections in Punjab and KP, and regarding of course the current political setup, and a lot that is there to blame them considering the current economic and political chaos. But all of that has now been shifted to one man, which has been referred to as Super King by the PTI chairman, the former army chief, who is responsible for all of this according to him. He has also been quoted because of what he has said in a column in an interview where the former army chief has talked about his decision to not be involved in the political scenario where the former prime minister was asking him to save his government. And this is being referred to as evidence of his involvement with the political interventions, and then of course also the conspiracy that resulted in the ouster of the PTI chairman. We're going to be taking a look at what all of this means, of course, and especially in terms of the way this is now going to unfold with regards to where the PTI stands at the moment, the elections of course in KP and Punjab, and why now these sort of allegations have been coming in regarding the economic and political chaos in the country, which is being blamed on one man who of course was the army chief in the tenure of the PTI chairman when he was the prime minister. According to him, his entire tenure was just like that of a puppet because his hands were tied. Something of course different from his previous statements coming in as well, especially in a recent interview with the New Yorker, where he said that only about 6 months he wasn't able to make decisions. The rest were his. But let's see what this means and what it holds true for the PTI and then of course other political parties and how this is going to be taken forward. Our next segment is going to take a look at a news report that has come regarding the misuse of power in India regarding the freedom of press, and how unfortunately because the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is a populist and authoritarian leader, and the way that the stance of the Indian democracy has fallen over the years, and especially in his tenure, it is a remarkably alarming situation regarding freedom of press and the protection of journalists and journalism within the country, which unfortunately has led to a series of censorship measures taken by the government, and then even a more stricter measure perhaps in terms of self-censorship, since everyone is so afraid and worried about the statements they make and the consequences that they'll have to face as a result of that. We're also going to be taking a look at the recent issue with regards to a documentary titled The Modi Question, which invoked a series of emergency laws and in fact resulted in perhaps more talk about this particular documentary than was the intention of the BJP-led government. And because of that, there is a lot of talk and debate about how much you can even censor or put restrictions in terms of freedom of media and press, and what is the result of that, and how, if this is the state of affairs, can a country like India be called a democracy, and how it should be dealt because of these facts. So we're going to be taking a look at that at the end of the show as well. For this and more, as always in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farooq Patafi, and we've been joined online by Dr. Jamil Khan, who's a former ambassador. Thank you very much, Dr. Jamil, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. We'll start with our first segment regarding the political situation and, of course, the former Prime Minister Imran Khan's statements, again alleging that the conspiracy to ouster him was now not led by the US, but in fact was led by the former army chief and was exported from here to the US and then was implemented. This, of course, is a sharp U-turn from his previous statements and his allegations that he has held for quite some time, and especially in the aftermath of his ouster, when he also flagged a letter as evidence of US's involvement within the political affairs of the country. And a lot of that now is forgotten, and it's just being put on one man. What do you say of these statements and allegations, and how much do you think that this will carry any weight for anyone?
So now we have caused enough damage to this country. So now we have caused enough damage to our foreign policy. In fact, we have been making mockery of our politics, leading to the foreign policy impediments. Now, in your programs, I have been stating that in the PTV World programs about the telegram which was sent, about this cable which was sent, about this narrative which was made at that point in time. I had been giving the technical aspects of it and the tactical aspects of it. This is really so heartbreaking that we have suffered. We have suffered because of such instances of our politicians, including the PTI chairman. Now, the PTI chairman narrative, half of the country was following him. Half of the country was buying that narrative that yes, it was a conspiracy. It was Donald Lu who had made this, who had hatched this conspiracy. And then later on, what is revealed after such a long time was half of the nation, or probably more, believed and trusted. So now let me also tell you the domestic politics, which often shapes the country's foreign policy. And country's foreign policy is in the interest of the motherland. It's in the interest of the country. And for such narratives and with such statements, the interest of the motherland is impacted and affected. Right? We should refrain that in whatever frame of time it was, whether it was the last year, last year, 10 years ago, or whether if it's happening now, it should be avoided because
Hmm.
these are the statements, these are the instances of our politicians which cause damage to the nation, which cause damage to the cause of our country. And I personally feel, and people like myself, we have a pain in our heart that we should not damage the cause, the foreign policy, just because we want to have our supporters and just because we want to gain some popularity, just because we want that the next election we should be able to become a prime minister. It should not happen, as a matter of fact, because if that kind of a narrative, what happens is that election hardline stance on foreign policy to appeal their political base, to appeal their supporter, it definitely doesn't work. It causes damage and it causes irreparable damage to the country. That's what we are having.
Absolutely. And I understand, Dr. Jamil, I understand that sentiment, of course, in terms of the kind of damage that exists. But there is, of course, the issue of accountability. But Farooq, we hear it from the PTI chairman himself also, and he keeps on raising this issue. Of course, perhaps there is not much self accountability involved, but he kept asking again that the former army chief be held accountable for the kind of actions that he has made. And then, of course, the recent remarks that were quoted in a column by the former army chief have been given as evidence by the PTI chairman and other party leaders, as well as his confession in terms of political intervention, even though if you look closely, it seems that that perhaps is otherwise. But considering accountability and considering the PTI chairman's stance at the moment, what do you think in terms of the action that is needed for anyone who is to blame for the current economic or political crisis? Because it seems that everybody is pointing in the other direction.
Right, Sana. Thank you very much for this question. Regarding these interviews that keep on appearing in vlogs or columns, pray ask me about that later in the program because I want to comment on that as well. But regarding Imran Khan Saab's position, I think that the way he has actually given this interview actually makes a mockery of his all early stances, right? Earlier, as you very pithily actually pointed out, that it was the idea of imported government or an imported conspiracy. The assumption was that because he went to Russia on the eve of invasion of Ukraine, Because of that, America had it for him, and that's why they conspired to get him out of power. Now, what exactly is the evidence of that? Only one cipher that was written by our ambassador to our authorities, and at that time too, there was a casual meeting in which those remarks were made, which were then documented. On the other side, now he is saying, Imran Khan Sahib is saying, that the former army chief actually conspired, to convince America that he is anti-American, and that's why America actually staged this counter conspiracy or some kind of conspiracy. Now, amazingly, if the extent of that letter or that cipher is the extent of conspiracy, tell me which army chief in a country where you have had a long history of military takeovers, an army chief would go abroad or somehow contact foreign powers, convince them, and in the end get a letter that is written by your ambassador to your country, and after that, that is the extent of the conspiracy then? Why would he need that? He could have done it on his own, right? The problem at this moment, why all this poo-pooing and changing direction, is that America has not retired Sana, but the former army chief has retired, right? Because he has taken retirement. That's how Imran Khan Sahib thinks that he is free to attack him and make him the whipping boy of the whole story. So that will continue. But it saddens me actually that, as was pointed out by Ambassador Saab as well, one man's miscalculations, like going to Russia at that time, when perhaps not going would have been prudent, and at that time too, then he made a point of appearing on screen and saying exciting times, right? The way he talks. And then after that, making it about America somehow, unfortunately, damaged not only our foreign policy, but it damaged America-Pakistan relationship domestically, because every time there was a congressional hearing about Pakistan, Sana, Pakistan's critics would actually stand up and cite a Pew survey that Pakistan has so many anti-Americans or so much anti-American sentiment, and that's why are we working with that country? That was one of the major ways to actually undercut Pakistan's authority or influence. And now when you actually are telling your own countrymen that there was a conspiracy, not only are you damaging relationship with that country, you're damaging your image in that country, but you're also increasing anti-Americanism in the country by doing that, ensuring that this relationship never actually works in harmony or tandem. And now all this should be a learning moment for everybody.
Absolutely. And Ambassador Saab, this is of course an important point when we take a look at our relationship with different countries. And you mentioned also that how this is not based on personal interest. And of course, national interest is supreme. But it seems that the way that this was blamed entirely on the US in the past was used for personal political gains. And now, of course, it seems that the US has been forgiven or forgotten from the PTI chairman's book. But at least in terms of how we want to move forward, what is the accountability for somebody who can recklessly blame countries or institutions for own personal or political gains? There doesn't seem to be much. It seems that even as the general political setup or at the state level, we have forgotten the statements made in the past.
Well, the kind of confusion, the kind of mistrust, the kind of mockery which we have made of ourselves, because of this cipher, because of the narrative developed on the basis of this cipher. I've been stating in your programs that this cipher is a normal thing. The ambassadors, including myself, while I was ambassador in so many countries, we've been writing these ciphers, these telegram, what we call. And then we've been giving our opinion about it on various aspects. And then showing it in a very big convention, making a narrative out of it. I think the foreign minister of that time, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, should also be put on the mat and should also be made accountable for such an act that he was able to, steal that cipher and was brought
Right,
to the
but
light.
Ambassador
This
Saab,
cipher,
the former foreign minister is one thing. We haven't still held the PTI chairman accountable.
well, anyone, everyone who is connected with this nation has to decide once for all that these kind of mockery, these kind of narratives, which causes damage to the country, should be stopped and should be brought to an end once for all. And that's only possible. That's only possible if we bring people to an accountability framework. If we don't do that, it will keep happening because instability in political system, the narrative of this kind in the political system of any country, leaving aside Pakistan, is an hindrance, and it establishes and it does not maintain the stable foreign policy relations with other countries. And that has a very far-fetched, damaging impact on the country. Now, what have you shown to the world? Are we a nation? And if we are a nation, why are we making mockery of such things? And then, if we may had made a mockery of that thing, right? I'm referring to the cipher. Then, all of a sudden, the entire situation changes, the entire scenario changes, the entire narrative changes. Who would trust us? Who would believe us? Who would take us as a serious nation? And that doesn't happen. We have to, first of all, whether it's this government or the previous government or a government 10 years ago, we should ascertain that the foreign policy matter should only be dealt by one person, and that's the foreign minister, who should be accountable, who should be responsible, and
Right.
who should be, yes, who
Right.
should be put
Right,
on
Farooq,
the
in the
accountability
past,
system.
the statements, of course, have changed by the PTI chairman, but what has also changed is that from roaring speeches and jalsas, we now see televised addresses where he talks about all of these different allegations. And so perhaps the number of people or his outreach has also been affected. We, of course, know that he still makes it to the headlines one way or the other, but who really is listening to Hansab at the moment?
Yeah, that is funny question because yesterday when he was actually funny regarding funny context, not that there's anything wrong with the question. Yesterday when Imran Khan Sahab was delivering his address to the nation, they had this key channel on YouTube that is called PTI official, right? In that channel, I was looking at how many people are watching it. So initially it was 1.2K, total 1,200 people watching it. Usually it used to be really through the roof. But then when I pointed out, somehow the numbers started increasing, but they stopped at 3.5K, that is 3,500. So the question at this moment is, who is watching him? Who is listening to him? I think one thing is for sure, that is media is still obsessed because your media doesn't work on any scientific methods, right? Media does not use any kind of popularity surveys. So last time when there were by-elections in Punjab, because Punjab is the only province that, or Karachi for that matter, only two places that matter to your media because all your elites actually, media elites come from those two areas. Last by-elections took place in Punjab. At that time, Imran Khan was running hot, and he got a lot of votes. And that's why, or at least he managed to secure the seats that he was actually contesting on. Because of that, your media thinks that he is an ascendant power. And of course, then your media also has this, somehow impulse to side with any kind of fascism and anti-Americanism as well. So media continuously has been actually propping him up But that doesn't mean he's popular anymore. I don't think that all these, U-turns on foreign policy or narrative will really damage him. I think the damage was done by one, not reading the condition correctly. You can keep on pumping your people against the state institutions. But in the end, when you talk about conservative voters that vote for either PMLN or PTI, the instinct is to side with your establishment and state institutions. That moment has passed when he could actually exploit that popularity. And the second thing is that because of the personal audio leaks, that was also something. Remember, this society, no matter how liberal we claim to be, we are very, conservative society, and our hypocrisy is in that context is known. That's why Imran Khan lives a different life and projects a different kind of life. So this was a case of being hoisted on his own petard. And that's why Imran Khan Sahib has been losing all this popularity, and he continues to do that. Unfortunately, my concern is that your media and your elite, because whosoever is withholding any kind of by-elections from Punjab are doing Imran Khan Sahib a huge service. Because my calculation is whenever a new election takes place, localized or whatever, he is going to lose. If he loses, then all that image that people have kept in their minds that Imran Khan Sahib somehow is an ascendant power, and he has been pushed out of power, and tomorrow if elections take place, he is going to come back to power, that impression will be wasted. So whosoever is asking you not to hold by-elections in Punjab, they are actually doing a lot of damage to the cause against Imran Khan.
And regarding media, why the recent spike in interviews to international media as well?
Right. I think Imran Khan Saab's interview, if you see with whom he is talking, he has a very limited list of Pakistani anchors with whom he is talking, right? All those people who actually finish his sentence. If you have seen certain interviews, you will feel that they are actually asking him to comment in this way. And he does that, of course, because they are simpatico. But apart from that, how many times can you give interview to the same anchors? So what do? You go and you talk to the international media as well, because you think somehow, of course, you are inhaling your propaganda as well, and you think that international markets are also influential in this context. And by the way, there is another international angle to it as well. I will like to actually mention that too. But at this moment, when you give interviews and there are questions, he's trying to actually portray himself as a neutral guy who can work with any government, any country. But the actual thing that he actually miscalculated at that time, when after Afghanistan, it was thought that somehow Donald Trump is once again ascendant, and because he knew him personally, he thought that if Republicans actually dominate America, somehow President Biden will be shown the door, or he will be compromised. So he can play with that, and then tomorrow, when pro-Putin Trump actually comes back to power, he can also become the Amir al-Mu'minin of Pakistan. So that didn't happen. And that's why he has lost that hand. Then domestically also, he kept on actually recruiting for one guy as the army chief, and he lost his hand there as well. So all these things actually come together. But Imran Khan Saab's biggest, benefit was his Pakistan's diaspora that he has been actually counting on or exploiting on the basis of mention of Islamophobia and all. You will notice that Imran Khan's definition of Islamophobia is different from your or mine. We would talk about Islamophobia as hate crimes against Muslims all over the world. He talks about only those people who are religious or who are actually in extreme, and their symbolism. Why? Because that way he can actually exploit that diaspora. They don't integrate. It benefits Imran Khan because they become a voice domestically, and he can exploit them and get popular with their kith and kin back at home. And this, unfortunately, is actually making it difficult for your diaspora to integrate also. Because in the end, remember, if you want a person not to become a target of hate, you have to tell them to embrace the society that is there. But your version of Occidentalism, which actually somehow tells those people that you are not integrated because those people are inferior to you. Remember Imran Khan's speech at the UN, where he says that if a woman doesn't dress or is not wearing anything, you don't criticize her, but you could criticize a woman who is wearing a niqab. So in the end, what you're telling people is that think lower, less of the people who are living there. And that actually works, because then you're angry all the time. You don't want to embrace that culture. And then we expect hospitality from those cultures as well. That becomes a problem, Sana.
Absolutely, and there are too many layers to a lot what Khan Sahab has said in the past. But Ambassador Sahab, I'd like to explore a little bit more about the issue of terrorism as well, something that he also mentioned while talking with regards to, again, blaming the security agencies and intelligence institutions, and because of their negligence, as he speaks, is why we are facing the current issue regarding terrorism in the country. But of course, there have been other statements as well and other opinions regarding the PTI chairman's own approach towards the TTP and of course the Taliban regime in Afghanistan as being the reason as to why this happened. This of course brings us now again to the question of who's responsible or who was in authority, because what the PTI chairman is now doing is taking away any blame from himself, saying that his hands were tied throughout his tenure and he was not the decision maker. But as the person holding the highest office in the country, are you not responsible for everything that goes on within the country?
Absolutely. Anyone who is the person head of the department, head of the branch, head of the section, head of the district, as head of the division, the province, or head of the country is responsible. I can tell you, Sana, that even an SHO who have some conscience, they refuse illegal orders. They refuse some of the things which are in their jurisdiction and someone is encroaching that. Now, in my own personal experience, I've been refusing. I've been asking the authorities that, okay, I should be moved. I don't want to serve any longer. Right? Why not a chief executive of the country? In fact, the chief executive of the country should be the first person who come, who should come up to the expectations of people and tell the people of the country that, well, this is the thing which is against my mandate, which is against my job description, which is against my mandate, and which is against my and which is against my ethics, and therefore I don't want to really stay any longer unless these things are rectified. Just telling someone that, this is what had happened, and I was powerless. I have served this Pakistan. I have come back after 20 years of my service in United Nations and as a diplomat and as an ambassador. And why have I come back? Most of the diaspora of Pakistan, what do they feel? They feel, and if I may recite a poetry, दिल से निकलेगी ना मरकर भी वतन की उल्फत, दिल से निकलेगी भी ना मरकर के भी वतन की उल्फत, मेरी मट्टी से भी खुशबू वफा आएगी, मेरी मट्टी से भी खुशबू वफा आएगी. And that's why the diaspora, and that's why people like myself who have much better opportunities outside the country, they have come back. And if they see this kind of an environment, if they see that what is happening around, if they see this what our politicians are doing, they definitely get disappointed. But despite that, our nation is so resilient. Our nation has so much of potentials that if they are given a chance, if our leaders, they do not really take a U-turn, they stand to their feet, they do not accept if they feel that something is wrong, then they are the one, they lead the country. Basically, if Bajwa was saying something with the chief executive of this country, and that was Imran Khan at that time, he did not agree with it, and he thought that it was against his mandate. He would have come to the public, to the people of Pakistan, and would have said that I don't want to serve as a just just a dummy, you know. So if that was not done, then I can narrate 101 stories to you now that during my service and during my services to this nation for more than 45 years, how many encounters I had of this kind. I can give you the example. The president of that time, while I was ambassador, had issued the instructions to do something and I refused. I said, okay, transfer me. Send me back. I don't want to serve here. Not only that, so many other occasions, so many other people of this country, so many other bureaucrats, if they can do it, not all, but many, right? If politicians, there are some politicians, they have done it in past, Mohammed Khan Junejo, right? So if they could do it, why not Imran Khan? Why not someone else, right? So we have to have a very strong moral ground to this to run the country. And if we
Right.
don't have that, and if the history and if the subsequent subsequent act of such people, like the chief executive of the country, if it proves that well, I was helpless, but still I was trying to grab the power, and I wanted to continue as a prime minister. Well, that doesn't make any sense to a person
Right.
like myself and so many millions of
Right, but
people
but you're
of this
talking
country.
about people of integrity, and it doesn't make sense to them, but perhaps it makes sense to other people. But let's move on also with regards to the way that we look at this entire situation. Farooq, of course, this question mark still exists in terms of what the PTI chairman has said, what he has talked about, what allegations he makes, and the kind of U-turns he does. But again, this hasn't been much consequence. But even now, while he's blaming one person with regards to so much that is going wrong within the country, we also keep on hearing, especially international media as well, this talk of how the army runs the state, or the institutions are the one that are the decision makers or involved in the political affairs of the country, when we're of course making tremendous efforts otherwise. But considering these statements coming in now and the political and economic crisis that Pakistan is currently going through, the statements of a former prime minister, what sort of impact do they have, regardless, of course, that we take a look at his outreach or where he stands today, in terms of course, how Pakistan is perceived as a country or as a democracy? Does this also not harm beyond the individual that the PTI chairman is mentioning?
Right, Sana. I think that whatever is going on, and we are back to the debate about perception versus reality. I couldn't care less about perceptions because we have to live with the realities, whatever are there on ground. So I will rather focus on how to improve the environment around me. And unfortunately, so far, we have been hearing that perceptions are more important than reality, right? Especially from people like Imran Khan Sahib himself, or before that, there used to be General Musharraf, who used to talk about soft image of the country. My concern at this moment is what happened on ground and what Imran Khan Sahib is saying, whether it holds any water or not. I think with my humble submission is now he might be referring disparagingly to the former army chief as a grade 22 officer. But at that time, go back, especially at the start of his tenure, and see what kind of variations in language were being used to eulogize the same man, right? This is one thing. He actually went to the extent of calling him co-equal partner, right? And the army chief had to tell him, sir, I'm your subordinate. I'm not your co-ruler of the country. But regardless of that, there is an explanation how in the Warren era, Imran Khan Sahib actually co-opted the system and found a way to undercut, even if the army chief had any kind of power or influence, even undermine him. During Donald Trump's time, he went to Washington, D.C., and if you remember, he was accompanied by, army chief, not only that, but also DGSI of that time. And during that meeting, he actually developed a personal connection, and the DG also was being pushed. Today, he has problem with the grade 22 officer, but he was constantly supporting or promoting his grade 21 officer, right? Remember that as well. But then, through that official, he kept on influencing the outcome of Afghanistan, even when the Washington government in Washington, D.C. changed. And he kept on also influencing the areas adjacent with Afghanistan. And because of that, we have seen that when he was asked to let go of that DGSI, he insisted that that shouldn't be the case. Many people say that that was the foundation of his fight with the former army chief, because in the end, that official had to serve in a command position as well. Then we heard that he had even given the idea that the ISI, which is a directorate, should be given the status of a corps. And that was not done. Then he also gave the idea that it should be merged with, Peshawar Corps, right? 11 Corps. That didn't happen. Then he actually made sure that the gentleman is posted to Peshawar, which is the place that calls shots regarding Afghanistan-Pakistan border as well. So Imran Khan Sahab might not have power on many things, but he had absolute power when it came to Afghanistan-Pakistan border, our war and terror areas. Remember, after he was gone from center, even then in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the adjacent areas, which are actually used to be called FATA, are now part of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. He had his government there, right? Had he not dissolved his own government, he would still be actually calling shots there. So in that situation, I do not think Imran Khan's point of view regarding war and terror holds any water. He wanted, actually, he thinks that TTP and Afghan Taliban are better than you and I, because they are religious and because that kind of religious populism plays to the gallery. That's why he kept on rooting for them rather than us. And no matter what happens, at this moment, if there is a resurgence of terrorism in the country, it is basically primarily because of Imran Khan Saab's insistence, miscalculation, or machinations.
Right, and of course, we hope that there can be some sort of accountability and consequence, because we don't have to convince him of this accountability. We just have to make sure that we go through with it. But let us move on to the next segment now, which takes a look at the situation within India regarding the issues of freedom of press and the protection of journalists, which of course is a huge question mark, especially under the tenure of the current Prime Minister. And we have seen numerous reports coming in with regards to any voice that is against the current government being shut down and the journalists not being allowed to report on what the government does. And this, of course, puts a huge question mark on the credibility of the entire democratic structure of the country. Unfortunately, it still does not put any sort of question mark regarding the relationship that India enjoys with major countries around the world. And because of that, again, there is a lot of impunity regarding this. Ambassador Saab, when we look at this particular situation within India, it puts huge question marks on the entire essence of democracy, the so-called largest democracy. But when we take a look at this particular scenario, we have seen in the past that any voice that reports against the BJP or the Indian Prime Minister, or even slightly talks about what sort of measures they're taking, is shunned. And because of that, nobody really is reporting the truth. And if that's not happening, what's the point anyway? What do you think needs to be done regarding this consequence? Because, of course, within India, this is something that's already happening. But as an international community, we're not making India pay for it.
Well, multilateralism. If multilateralism is involved, if the multilateral strategy is involved, then India could be exposed. Modi's doctrine could be exposed. BJP doctrine could be exposed. RSS empowered BJP would be exposed. So it's basically multilateralism. India, whatever they are doing on the basis of their their alliance with certain very powerful countries, including United States. They are doing it basically because of the trade empowerment. They are doing it because of the economic empowerment. But all that, what they are doing, is cannot be bought by the world community if the world community is made to realize what India is doing and what the BJP government is empowered with. RSS, RSS empowered BJP, lynching of the minorities, lynching of the Muslim community there, marginalizing the Kashmiris, turning the Kashmiris into minorities against the Geneva Convention, Article 49, against the UN Security Council resolutions. Well, that is to be propelled and that is to be made known to the majority of the world community. And if they are made to know about it on the basis of multilateralism, then India would definitely, and the BJP would feel, the BJP government would feel that what is the instance, what the world community feels. But the world community can only feel all what is happening in India on basically if there is a bottom of pressure in the countries who matter, in the countries who love the human right, the essence and the human right value. If there is a bottom of pressure, those particular countries would then, once they appear in the Security Council or the General Assembly, then they would feel the pressure. The respective governments would feel the pressure, and then they would really speak and they would really feel that what is a human right violation,
All right.
what is a violation of international law. Yes.
Right, and that is important. But there are two aspects to this entire situation also, Farah. One that is the self-censorship, which unfortunately is a result of too much censorship by the government as well, which doesn't allow for any space for journalists or other voices to come forward. And then, of course, the issue also of certain measures backfiring, such as that of the BBC documentary that took place that unfortunately was banned, or emergency laws were invoked regarding its release. But at the end of the day, what happened was that more and more people who got to hear about it and then learn about it. And so these are important lessons when we take forward the issue of the freedom of press, and something maybe perhaps that is not very obvious to the current BJP government. And because of that, we see that there's a lot of harm being done to the issues of journalists or press, which really need to thrive in a democracy. But again, this is part of so much else that is not right with the current setup within India. How can the people around the world, both within India and outside, help?
Right, Sanam. First of all, my hats off to BBC, which actually focused on its own damage as well. By the way, if you look at Godhra and 2002 violence, but they have the reporter has also actually mentioned or actually reproduced her own coverage of Godhra incident, where actually people were killed. After that, of course, then he corrects as well that after that we knew, we are not sure who actually was responsible. But I think, with due respect, while it is most welcome and it was very inspiring piece of work, excuse me, it is late. It is too late. Indian current government, earlier Ambassador Sir was talking about BJP actually being a political front or somehow being empowered by RSS. My contention is that there has been a counter coup, and now if there used to be BJP used to be a puppet of RSS in the past, political puppet. Now the tail is wagging the dog. It has taken over RSS as well. Narendra Modi is the brand, he is the system, he is the political culture. Regarding media, because there was a lot of talk about in 2014 about Gujarat model, where minorities were shunned to a side, and because of the vacuum created, businessmen were empowered. Two businessmen, Ambani's and Adani. Adani, the same guy who is under a lot of criticism now, they became not only Indian brand, but they became international brands, right? Last time the gentleman from India was saying that he used to have hundreds of billions of dollars before Narendra Modi came to power. The fact is that the gentleman who had $8 billion became 140 billion rich during Narendra Modi's time. So Adani also took over one of the only independent-minded organizations like NDTV, and they actually booted all the journalists who were there. So at this moment, I think that the control or takeover is complete. We can actually celebrate this. We can celebrate New York Times, but let us face it. While they might have incredible power all over the world, these publications don't have any reach inside India. So that war is lost. I'm trying to actually make peace with what India is. Although I used to love what India was, but I have to make peace with it. Sadly, whenever we actually try to settle on one thing or the other, the world community somehow actually moves in the opposite direction.
Right, and it is truly saddening, of course. It's a huge loss for everyone whenever that happens, especially, of course, with the people residing within India as well. But thank you, Farooq, for those comments. And thank you, Dr. Jamil Khan, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.